The Nashville Predators need a lot more from their players than they got last season. Today, we'll tell you who we believe are most likely to bounce back well next season, and we're going to share the one Predator who is the key to making that happen.
You're Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Predators podcast. Thanks so much for making us your first listen of the day. We are, of course, your free daily Nashville Predators podcast. We're a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to kick off this Thursday? You know we love Thursdays around here. Shouting out our Locked On Predators insiders and our everydayers who tune in to talk Nashville Predators hockey with us. I'm Ann Kimmel. I am a writer and co-host with Penalty Box Radio, and my friends, I have a partner in crime.
You do, and a hearty happy Thursday to you all. I am Emma Lingen, and I am the Predators site editor and reporter for the Hockey News.
Yeah, so last week it was Tuesday, and I started off our show wishing everyone a happy Thursday. I was just so confused. And I'm not saying things are clearer, but we have just committed to loving Thursdays around here. And today, folks, you woke up and it really is Thursday, so we don't have to pretend anymore. So happy Thursday, everybody. It's just going to be a killer day. We're sure of it. Today, we are going to dive into individual performances from last season and kind of look at the bigger picture here. You know, most everybody on the Predators roster, I think we can agree, underperformed last season. Today, we are going to talk about the players we think are most likely to get back to their average or above next season. And we're going to tell you why we think that. Before we dive into all of that, do want to let you know today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. All right, Emma, before we dive into the team that was and the team we need them to be, let's talk real quick about conference finals. And we're going to start in the AHL because the Milwaukee Admirals played game 3, allegedly, last night against the Texas Stars. I do all I can sitting on my couch in Nashville, but it did not go well. Texas won 6-1. In this game. It was a much closer game than that until the third period where Texas scored 4 goals. They scored 3 goals in like 2.5 minutes in the third period, and it really was a runaway game. Do you want to shout out Spencer Stasny, hockey extraordinaire and tax specialist, we're sure. He did score for the Admirals. This is one of those games, Emma, where I'm like, the Admirals looked really good until they didn't. So now it's back to win or go home. That's going to be Friday night's game for Milwaukee. It is in Milwaukee. That home ice advantage did not kick in last night, but hopefully they can win game 4 and stay in this series. But man, can we just have a nice thing, Emma? Can we just have a sweep, a series sweep, not a reverse sweep? I mean, we'll take it at this point, but just a sweep. Good cats.
Yeah, it's a little too much anxiety. Although it's funny because it seems like the Texas Stars and the Dallas Stars had very similar third periods last night. Dallas came out. I think they scored 5 unanswered goals in the third period. 3 of them were power play goals. I mean, credit to Dallas, but also what a collapse by Edmonton.
Oh my gosh. It was so funny. So I had Edmonton and Dallas on the big TV and Milwaukee, Texas on the computer. And there was one point in the third period where both teams scored goals within like 2 seconds of each other. And I said, oh man, the Stars scored. And he's like, which one? And I'm like, both. Both did. Yeah. You know, credit to Dallas. Just absolutely took over that game, but it's almost overshadowed by the absolute what in the flagnog Edmonton that happened in that third period. Also, here's just an idea, throwing it out there. Get out of the timeout booth. Get out. Stop it. Dallas, 3 of 4 on the power play. How about you just don't commit some penalties? Man, that was epic. And not in the fun way. If you were an Edmonton fan, that was not good.
No, I do feel a little vindicated though, because I mean, I know I'm not the only one who said this, but the concern about Edmonton coming into the playoffs, like well before this series, was their defense and their goaltending. And yet they kept figuring out ways to get it done. And it's like, yes, we know they have two guys named Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, and they can outscore a lot of mistakes. And like, that's all well and good. But I was like, I don't know, I kept saying, like, eventually this is gonna catch up with them. Now, it's been one game, so I'm not, like, I'm not saying that the tides have totally turned, but we finally saw, I kept betting against Edmonton, not betting money, but, like,
Right.
when making my series predictions, it was like, "Yeah, I think LA is gonna do it." They didn't do it. "Oh, I think that, Vegas is gonna do it." They didn't do it. And it's like, how did they I need to stop betting against the Oilers. But now it's
Ooh,
like,
game 1. Emma Cash is in, friends.
yeah, now I wish I had bet money. Not really.
I know. You know what's so funny is on the NHL squad show that I think comes out today, they made us do predictions and I was like, "Look, this is not my jam, but fine, whatever." And I was like, I think Edmonton is going to get it together. I think, middle of the conference finals, they're saying Matthias Ekholm may be back. I think Stuart Skinner better after 2 shutouts. And then I was like, I think Carolina, the sum of Carolina is better than the parts. And I think Carolina. And so I just look like a fool after game 1 of the conference finals, but we'll just see what happens, people. I said what I said. I said what I said. Yeah. One of the things that we are learning conference finals, whether it's the AHL or NHL, is that you need players to be playing at their best. And that is something that Nashville Predators fans did not get an opportunity to see last season. And it is such a phenomenon to me, Emma, because if you look across the board, nobody had a career season. And in 2023-24, I think 5 players had career seasons. And you add these pieces, that are going to change the trajectory and that changed expectations for this team. And rightly so. Rightly so. Barry Trotz, like expectations were too high. Well, look at what you did. Of course, expectations were higher. And you don't play hockey on paper, but you do look at numbers on paper, and the numbers indicated some things. Well, what Nashville got was disappointing seasons basically across the roster. Coming up, we are going to talk about the players we think are most likely to bounce back next season. We're going to tell you why. And at the end of this episode, we're going to tell you what the key to it all is. Today's episode is brought to you by our great friends at FanDuel. The NBA playoffs, they are in full swing, friends. Every night is delivering highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't miss moments. Whether it is that game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. Are you new to FanDuel? It is the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and you can place your first $5 bet. And if that $5 bet wins, you are going to get $200 in bonus bets. So make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, Emma, we love our Locked On Predators insiders community. We chit chat with them about this, that, and the other thing quite often when it comes to the Nashville Predators and the NHL at large. And so we asked our insiders, who do you think is poised to bounce back from last season? And they gave us some interesting answers. And I think you and I are on the same page with a lot of this. The first name that really seemed to pop up, and this is one I strongly agree with, is Filip Forsberg. So this past season, he played all 82 games, 31 goals, 76 points. I think we forget because the season was such a dumpster fire, I think we forget that Forsberg had 31 goals and 76 points. That is his fourth best, tied for fourth best goal scoring season of his career, second best season in assists, third best season for points. So it's not like Filip Forsberg was, smoking underneath the bleachers during the games. He was out there doing his things. And the numbers say one thing, but I just think the overall season sentiment made it feel like we got less from Forsberg than maybe we really did.
Yeah, I think that is fair to say, because so many things went wrong. And he
Oh.
did have that that stretch, that goalless stretch, that was the longest of his career. And I don't remember now exactly how many games it was, but it was long in the middle of the season. And of course it coincided with the Predators being terrible. So it seemed really bad, and it was bad. But I think that makes the fact that he ended up with 31 goals and 76 points at the end of it all the more impressive. I'm also encouraged by the fact that he did play all 82 games and stayed healthy, and that's something he's been able to do for a couple years now. And it was something that he struggled with earlier in his career, so I am encouraged by that. But it's funny because when you said we were talking about what we were going to talk about on today's episode of like players who could, who we expect to bounce back or who are candidates to bounce back. I said, well, that's not a short list now, is it? Because I think everybody on this team
Nowhere to go
could
but up.
certainly stand to bounce back. But it's interesting. It got me thinking a little bit of the last now 4 seasons for the Predators. So if you go back to 2021-22, that was the season where like Matt Duchene set the goal scoring record. Like everybody had career years that year. Like it was like offensively just really kind of outperformed expectations. 2022-23 was the year that then they came in and really, I mean, honestly, injuries was a big part of it.
Yeah.
They had a lot of injuries, but then that was the trade deadline with Mikhail Granlund, Matthias Ekholm, Tanner Jeannot. All of those guys get moved out. And so that was kind of a weird season where it was like, it felt like a massive disappointment because they had just had, like, everyone had just had career years the year before. And then you go into the 23-24 season, first year under Andrew Brunette, which is what you were talking about, where like 5 guys had career years. And guys who were, maybe you could say even guys like Gus Nyquist, who arguably are past their prime. And it's like, okay, all right, we're back, we're rolling. And then we get to 2024-25 and it's back down again. So it's just been this constant like up and down, peaks and valleys. And you got to wonder, like, eventually I hope it'll level out overall. But
Right.
I agree that, Forsberg, again, if we're talking about all the myriad problems that there were this year, like Forsberg is not a guy that I'm worried about when it comes to his ability to bounce back from this.
Yeah. And I think there were a lot of factors that went into this season for Forsberg. For me, the biggest one is that there was the immediate blending away of the O'Reilly Nyquist Forsberg line. And you and I had said in training camp, these guys picking up right where they left off last season. And to me, I thought this is going to be Filip Forsberg's chef's kiss because he is set up with guys he has chemistry with. There is now more offensive threats. So it's not like an opponent only has to focus on one scoring line. And that didn't materialize. But yet I do think we got to give credit to Forsberg because amongst a season of injuries and line blending and, leadership paralysis and all of the things that, we've heard Barry Trotz talk about, he still scored 31 goals. Imagine what he could do if the smoke clears. just imagine. Some interesting insight from our insiders, and I think this is one of those things where I don't know how I feel about this, but we're going to go with it. One of our insiders said, Filip was adapting to new parenthood and also to making room for other stars, knowing that hockey is such a mental game. Those are two major shifts and distractions. He'll be more used to both of those things, and he's probably really freaking mad about this season because he is so competitive. And I'm always so fascinated about that off-ice narrative affecting on-ice narrative, because I think some people talk about it in such a negative way, like, oh, he had a kid and now he's focused on that. To which I say, first of all, have you seen Filip Forsberg? Totes adorbs. Second of all, they are allowed to have whole off-ice lives, and sometimes those lives will distract them. So I don't know. I think that's an interesting component. I'm always fascinated by that discussion, and probably a little oversensitive to it when people use it in the negative, which that insider did not. Another insider says, I really believe Filip Forsberg is going to find his way to form next season. I'm watching him in Worlds, and I'd like to see him get into more of a streak so he can feel better about his games. And I think Worlds is going to be critical. I think Worlds is a really good medicinal opportunity, especially for another player, and that is Juuse Saros. You and I don't want to dwell too much on Saros. I know we talked about him earlier on in this week, but I think Juuse Saros is one of those players that people were pretty down on this season. I think he's going to bounce back. And honestly, I don't even put a ton of effort into formulating an argument for why I think that, because I just think it's going to happen. He did finish with a sub 900 save percentage, and a 2.98 goals against average. That is his career worst since the season where he played one whole game. But you know what? I just don't worry a ton about Saros. And I do think what we're seeing of him in Worlds, I think that's pretty encouraging as well. What is your take on what we're going to see from Saros next season? And what do you think is going to be a difference maker? As I just said, I'm not even going to explain it to you.
Well, I think that, I sound like a broken record, but the defense in front of him has got to be better. And I think that falls on everyone. It falls, as we've talked about before, on Andrew Brunette, getting everyone on the same page defensively, to, ensure that you're not leaving your goalie out to dry all the time the way that they did last year. And I agree. You talk about someone who's competitive. My goodness, I would like to introduce you to Juuse Saros, because he's a guy that I've had the privilege of getting to know pretty well over the last few years. And his compete level is truly on another level, because it is just, he wants to win so badly. He wants to do his best so badly. And to the point where I was getting annoyed with him at the 2023 All-Star game, because I wanted to leave. It had been a long weekend. I was tired. I wanted to get home, but I couldn't leave until he was done. And, you could tell that guys were kind of going out there and phoning it in a little bit, because it was the All-Star game. No one really wants to be there. But he was playing his butt off. And I kind of told him beforehand, I was like, Juice, you can you don't have to full send on this one, just so you know. I would not be angry if we got to go home a little early. And he was like, oh no, I'm going to win. I was like, okay. And when he did, so got to stay there a little bit longer. That's okay. But my point is that he is, if you talk about someone who's going to be angry with how this season went, Juuse Saros.
Yeah. And I do think that it's very helpful, because for his role, he has such a great specialized team. Ben Vanderklok, Mitch Korn, going to be able to dial in on whatever Saros says. Hey, this is what I really want to focus on. They're going to come to him with, hey, here's some things that we've noticed from the film. Juuse Saros is going to be fine, you all. Juuse Saros is going to be fine. Coming up, we're going to share one other player that we think is going to be better next season. And then we're going to tell you the key to it all. So, Emma, in talking with our insiders and saying, hey, who do you think is going to bounce back? The most popular answer, Roman Josi. This season, Yosi played 53 games. He had 9 goals, 38 points. His 82-game career average. So if he plays an 82 game over his career, he would score 22 goals, 37 assists, 59 points. So, under that, but also only played 53 games. And that's a podcast for a whole nother day. Coming off of, like you said, up and down, excellent 21-22, excellent season. That was his 96-point season. He was second in the Norris because there was a guy with a hat who decided not to put Roman Josi at all on his ballot. Invisible backpack of hockey crutches. And then in 23-24, he had an 85-point season, which was his second best. Again, finished second in the Norris. So the narrative that Roman Josi is in a rapid decline has been greatly exaggerated. But this season, with injuries, with just an absolute decimated defense around him, it just left a disappointing taste in everyone's mouth when it comes to Roman Josi. And it's interesting to me when we think about Roman Josi because he's so key to everything. And I think for Roman Josi to bounce back, all he has to do is be on the ice in a lot of ways. One of our insiders said, I think it's easily Josi who has to get back to himself. He is the one who creates the space for everything that needs to happen offensively. And he was largely invisible or injured this season. He is the straw that stirs the drink. And I love that. He is the straw that stirs the drink. And you look at something as simple as the power play. Getting Josi back to quarterback the top unit on the power play will make a big difference. And I mean, no disrespect to Nick Blankenberg or Brady Shea, but they are not Roman Josi on the power play. And I think part of Steven Stamkos not lighting it up from the office is because Josi missed a lot of time as well. So I do think numbers-wise, performance-wise, a healthy Roman Josi, I think, is a good candidate to say this is somebody who is going to bounce back next season.
Yeah, I think obviously health is a big part of it. Same thing in that 22-23 season where he missed the back half of the year with, again, a head injury. You don't mess with those. So I think that, again, for him to make an impact, it's not going to be hard. When he's out there. And I think that as far as the leadership stuff, I know we heard a lot of that this year, that Josi is too soft to be the captain, blah, blah. No, it takes a group, it takes the group dynamics. And again, I think that starts at the top with the coach.
Yes. Another thing I think that's going to help Josi is if Barry Trotz can get the right defensive partner for him. That's going to be huge. You make such a great point, Emma. And I think this is where we need to land, because the key to any player performing better, the key to it all is Andrew Brunette. That's where this falls. One of our insiders said it's really going to come down to Bruno and how many, quote, tools he adds to his tool belt, or how many adjustments to the system he makes. And I think that is the truth. And I think it has to happen right out of the gate. And so I do feel like the pressure is on for Andrew Brunette. You have to come into training camp knowing that you have said everything that needs to be said. You have listened to everything that needs to be heard from players, from front office, from every angle. And you have taken that in, and you are ready with the team to start over with a fresh slate and complete buy-in. And I want to believe that can happen. And if it doesn't happen, it's not because people don't want it to, but you have to rebuild trust. You have to find a way to get these players to trust you. And I know that there were hard conversations. There will continue to be conversations over the offseason. This is not everybody goes to their corner. You can't just go to your corner in the offseason after what just happened for the Nashville Predators. We're going to continue to talk through the offseason and come to a point where everybody can come into training camp ready to perform at your best, because you cannot waste another season of Roman Josi, Filip Forsberg, Steven Stamkos, Jonathan Marchessault, Juuse Saros. You cannot waste another one of their seasons by allowing them to underperform. And it all starts with Bruno.
Yeah, if there is this leadership paralysis, it's no one person's fault. It's not Roman Josi's fault because he's the captain. It's not all on Brunette either. It's not only his fault. It's not Steven Stamkos' fault. It's not Filip Forsberg's fault. But when no one is going to get everyone on the same page, that's when the coach has to step in and has to take over again. Like I said before, he has to be, I am the captain now. Like, I come in and I'm going to control the room, because I understand that he's a player's coach and he doesn't want to be that iron fist, and, you know, the locker room is a sacred space, all of that. I think that there is a place for that. And I think that worked when this group was, again, a little bit more bonded and kind of knew the hierarchy, knew the chain of command. And now that they've added these new pieces, they need a reset. And Bruno gave them a little too much leeway to reset on their own, I think. And that's when, I know he doesn't want to do it. I know it's not comfortable, but growth begins at the end of your comfort zone, Andrew Brunette, and you got to go in and you got to be able to get everyone on the same page. Now, that doesn't mean that he needs to be that way all season, and that he needs to turn into, you know, turn into a like John Tortorella or something, and just start, you know, there's a happy medium. And I think that he needs to find that.
Yeah. And I think there are some practical things that will be helpful for the team that Andrew Brunette can do. I think, you know, we talked about making some adjustments. I think that is a practical thing. Coach the roster you have. Don't keep trying to fit that square peg in the round hole if it's not there, you know. And that doesn't mean you throw the baby out with the bathwater, but it does mean you coach the roster that you have. You have to get your best out of these players, whether, you know, and you have to balance system and roster as well. The other thing I think is consistent line mates. I think there's got to be a little bit more consistency and chemistry. And I think that is something that Andrew Brunette can control in game and early in the season. Like, it's tough, you know, and I get why it went the way that it did last season, but you have to, like you said, you know, growth is going to come at the end of your comfort zone, and it's going to be a knee-jerk reaction when things don't immediately click to go, it's not working. And maybe it's not, but you've got to give it time. And it's a tricky season for Andrew Brunette, because even though Barry Trotz came out and gave him a resounding vote of confidence, I don't think there's anybody in the NHL who doesn't believe that his seat isn't warm. You know, it all starts with Andrew Brunette. It's not all his responsibility, but I think he has to set a table where these players can come and sit down and be successful. So Andrew Brunette is going to be the key to it all, and a lot of work for everybody to do in the off season, on, and I think especially off the ice, to get ready to come back to training camp. But overall, Emma, like you and I were joking about this before we recorded, like, surely people are going to bounce back, because it can't get way worse.
Plenty of room for growth here, guys.
Yes.
Plenty.
There's space to the top. There's space to the top. So we're going to see what happens with the Nashville Predators as we get closer to preseason, to training camp, and all of that as well. Of course, between now and then, we have the draft. We have the NHL Combine. We have all kinds of other things coming up. We also have to do our player evaluations, and we are going to go individual player evaluations coming up to this offseason, kind of sharing highlights from each player and what we need to see from them going forward. So kind of a forward-looking look back coming up here. Before we log off on this Thursday, the best day of the week, Emma, will you let everyone know where they can find you and your work?
You can find me on social media at Emma_Lingen, and you can find my work at the Hockey News.
And you can find me on social media at AnnK_Mama on Ice. You can find my work at Penalty Box Radio as well. Friends, that's going to do it for this episode of the Locked On Predators podcast. Thanks so much for making us your first listen of the day. Go out and have the best Thursday. We will see you back here tomorrow.